Hello, everyone. Welcome back to episode 6 of the Enablement Brew. I'm Carly Lehner.
And I'm Malvina Elsayek, and we're so excited that you're joining us for yet another episode. Before we dive into today's topic, Carly, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking tea from my personalized
Tea.
Mug. Yep.
Yeah, coffee, but from a non-inspired mug.
You can't win them all, Malvina.
Although I did get really, really cute gingerbread mugs that I found on the weekend with like a little gingerbread man on them, and they're red. I'm going to bring it out next time closer to Christmas.
Yeah. Yes, we're still in November, so
I'm putting up my Christmas tree soon. I don't know about you.
We don't have room for a Christmas tree. Our flat is like tiny, so we will be getting like a tabletop Christmas tree and putting it on our coffee table and pretending that's like our big tree, I think, this year. So
you see, but I love that because as soon as Christmas is over, I'm the type of person, once we get to January 1st, I want all Christmas decorations gone. So I don't mind putting them up really early, but as soon as it's New Year's, like they all have to go. 1st of Jan, they have to go.
I can appreciate that for sure. Well, so today's topic is how to structure an enablement team. So I know there's a lot of people out there who are solo practitioners, Malvina, that includes you.
Yeah.
But the hopes and dreams of all enablement people is to have a team of people to do all of the enablement activities. But when you get to that point where you can grow and add more people to the team, the question is, what should they be responsible for and how should I organize the team accordingly? So, Malvina, you're currently thinking about hiring another person. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm hiring someone in New York. The job post is out on LinkedIn, so do have a
check it out.
Have a look. But the person that we're looking to hire at the moment will predominantly be looking at onboarding as their primary focus. I think onboarding, and we touched on this in our previous episodes, is such a huge element to success. You need that solid and strong onboarding program in place. And when you're doing it across regions here in London, in New York, potentially in other regions in the future as well, it is physically impossible for one person to look after that. So the way that I'm looking at it is the first person to come join me definitely focused on onboarding. And with that, also the element of continuous learning. So how do we ensure success post onboarding? It doesn't just finish there once you've done everything, I don't know, over the course of 3 or 4 weeks, but what do you do afterwards in terms of setting up everyone for success? So that's kind of the lens that I'm looking at it through now. But I also appreciate that as we hire more BDRs onto the team, as we grow the AE team, as our marketing continues to release new content and also potentially have more defined priorities, that I will probably have to look at some point for getting another person on board as well. And I think that's really exciting. I think for an individual enabler, you might have so many ideas, and this is where I am now. I have so many ideas, but I don't have the time, right, to execute on a lot of these. So yeah, I want to bring in someone creative who, will also help me think, how can we make things better? But Carly, I know you have a bigger team. You're no longer a one-man shop. Tell me what that looks like for you.
Yeah. So we at Andela, we have 4 enablement managers. One person is a program manager, so he oversees onboarding. But also I've given him our academy program, which is what we have our SDRs go through once they hit about a year in seat. And that basically builds upon their existing skills from being an SDR, and we can identify whether they should go to the account management, we call it client partner, or account executive role, or potentially even other roles. And that's like a future state I'd like to build into the program. And so because that mirrors so closely with onboarding for each of the roles, like it makes sense to own both of those programs. And then I have 3 enablement managers that basically pair up with the different roles in our sales team. So we have SDRs, so we have an SDR enablement manager. We have account executives, or, new logo, frontline, salespeople. I have an enablement manager for that. And then I have an enablement manager for account management team. And so I would say, like, looking back on this year, I started with, 1 enablement manager, and we've grown to this point now. I wish I would have hired the onboarding person like right away. Like, I think we're a bit behind on getting to the onboarding program that we should be having. And that's because I kind of allowed myself to be a solo practitioner. Well, really, I had another person, but she was new to enablement for a bit too long. Yeah. So I should have asked for that headcount much sooner. So I think you are very smart, Malvina, for hiring onboarding as soon as you are, because that role is so important as companies scale. Because like when I joined Andela, they had like an onboarding structure. Like they had like a 2-week training schedule. They had a sales learning platform that had content in it, but the content hadn't been updated in 2 years. So not only did reps go through that content, managers would spend probably 5 hours going through that content with their reps, saying what's actually up to date and what they should forget about, which is just ridiculous, right? So the goal should be to never have a stale onboarding program. And so hiring someone fully dedicated to that is really the only way to ensure that, kind of in my opinion.
So your onboarding or program manager, does this person look after SDR, AE, CS, and AM onboarding?
Yes.
Holistically?
Yes. So right now he joined at the end of September. And so he's just finished like kind of designing the SDR onboarding program. He's built out like a skills framework, competencies, all of that, facilitator notes for all the live sessions. So he's building our enterprise sales exec onboarding currently, and we'll build our SMB AE onboarding, and then our client partner onboarding. And then once those programs have actually been designed, the content's there, then he will manage, all the new hires that come on, scheduling their live trainings, getting them access to our learning platform and their, e-learning based onboarding content. So all of that, which it's going to be a big job. And I would say if as we scale, we may even need like an additional person on the onboarding team, more as like a live trainer or a facilitator of any live sessions, because we can't necessarily have him do all of it, because he might not have time to update the content when changes are made, right? And so that's something I'm kind of keeping my eye on, is how frequently does Andela change, and do we need to change our onboarding content? So yeah, onboarding is for sure, like, you should have a dedicated program manager for that. And I think that's pretty common. I've seen on enablement teams.
Let's talk job titles for a second, because that's an interesting one, I think, when it also comes to building out a team. There's so many different variations of sales enablement, even on LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
You have sales enablement executive, sales enablement manager, associate sales enablement something, right? And there's so many different variations. Do you have any best practices for the actual titles, or do you think it actually varies region to region?
It's interesting because I think it probably varies region to region, but there's sales enablement and there's revenue enablement. And that, I see them as very similar things. I always kind of define it as like, how much of the client journey do you own in enablement? And if it's literally end to end, I call that revenue enablement. But if it's top of funnel, you could call that sales enablement. The titles are interesting because when you think about like levels of like any sort of career, like you typically start as like analyst, coordinator, associate, like those types of titles. And then you can go up to like a specialist or a manager level. I've seen senior manager, I've seen lead, director, senior director, vice president. So I think it depends, but I just call everyone on my team a revenue enablement manager. Like I just keep it fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
Because like at the end of the day, they're all like on the same level in my eyes, like all doing pretty much the same types of enablement activities, at least the ones who are dedicated to a specific role.
Yeah.
The program manager, like, yeah, I think he has it on his LinkedIn as a program manager, which is totally fine. But like internally, no one knows what like the program manager like, he's on the revenue enablement team. Like, let's just call it that. So
keeping it easy.
I don't really pay too much attention to the titles almost, but there are some weird ones I've noticed. Like, I don't know what that means. But how do you kind of think about this?
Yeah, I think I'm on the same boat with you. I think we're all part of the same team. And I feel that a title sometimes can almost have, like, if you make it very specific, you're almost siloing a person into something else. And then it's very difficult to even position the role as, actually, it's not just this, it's this whole other set of activities that you will be responsible for. So I think, the broader it is, the better it is, unless, of course, it is something super specific, such as onboarding, such as a specific program that you're running or a program for a specific function, that's fine. But if the idea is, and we all know that things in enablement change so quickly, if what you're hiring the person to do today potentially will change a year down the line, then I think you should also take that into account in the title that you're giving them, because their roles and responsibilities might change and evolve over time, right? I think if you call, everyone sales enablement manager, sales enablement executive, whatever variation of that, I think the overarching theme is we are all working together in enablement, and ultimately we're supporting the revenue function. And potentially what it is that we're doing today will be different in 3 and 6 and in 12 months. And as part of our role and as part of the unit that we are, we need to be shapeshifters a little bit. And right.
Yeah, because there's a couple different ways that you could approach structuring your team. Like if you have a larger team, you could have people be responsible for regions globally, right? So I actually have someone who's based in Manchester. I could say he's responsible for all enablement activities across all roles in EMEA. I have someone who's, I have 2 people on the West Coast. I have 1 person on the East Coast. I could like break it out into regions in the US, for example. Or if I'm a truly global team, if I have someone in APAC, something, similar. So you could do it that way. The challenges I see with that is that you are responsible for literally everything in one region. And really, like, our business isn't drastically different region to region. It's just where we're located is really like the biggest difference. And so I prefer having someone responsible for all SDRs across the globe, because we should really be operating the same regardless of where we're sitting. However, if you have a hub and spoke model of your business where you're pretty decentralized, it might make sense to have someone who's responsible for EMEA or, APAC or whatever, if those roles operate pretty like individually in that region, because that's really when it makes sense. If it's just for like time zone support, like what the enablement manager on my team who's here in the UK, he offers his support to everyone in EMEA outside of AEs, because he's sitting in our working hours, right? But he's building content and building like the strategy for account executives. But he will support SDRs, he will support client partners when they have questions, because he's here and he's awake when they are. So like you said, like we're all a team. Just because like they're responsible for SDRs doesn't mean that they're not going to support everyone else when they need help. It's just who's actually building the content when it's time to actually produce some sort of deliverable is kind of how I've structured the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you're scaling and growing and you're trying to maintain that consistency, because ultimately consistency will allow you to see what's working, what's not working, right? And if you want to implement some sort of a change, that's very difficult to do is if everyone is doing something completely different, right? So I think if you do opt for that layout where you have someone looking after a specific region, I think that's fine, so long as they know they all have to at some point come together and communicate, whether it's on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, to ensure that we're consistent, right? Unless, as you've mentioned, that's not an important factor. I know for me, having that consistency is important. So with any kind of role and function that I'm going to be bringing into the team, my question is, wherever you are based, how do we make sure we do things one way? And of course, there'll be regional nuances and, certain things we have to take into consideration. But as a whole, like, what's our way of selling? What's our way of communicating with our customer? What's the service that we want to offer? How do we want to make our customers feel if it's, if they're getting a demo or if they're finally signing the contract? Like, those things should be together. And we should be aligned on that.
For sure. Yeah.
I think there's another interesting role within enablement, which is a dedicated sales trainer.
Yes. Yeah.
Thoughts on
so
that?
I always thought like that seems crazy to me. Like I've always worked in organizations where I don't possibly have enough work for a full-time sales trainer. However, now that we're scaling and hiring more people, I'm kind of thinking I might need someone just to facilitate onboarding. Like, we are responsible for 4 different onboarding programs in our commercial team. And I don't want my onboarding program manager to do all of that. And our managers are going to get burnt out from doing all of that after like 3 or 4 onboarding groups. So it might make sense to hire someone. But then the question is, if you have a methodology that you subscribe to internally, when you have new hires come on, like who's going to train them on, Sandler or Challenger or, spin selling or whatever you decide to use. Like, someone's going to need to train them on that. And if you have a trainer who's certified in all of that, that's great. That's really exciting. They can do that. But yeah, so I'm becoming more open to the idea, but I've never been on a team that has a dedicated trainer like that. That's their sole job. But I know you have a lot of experience with, facilitating programs. I know that was one of our videos from earlier in the series, but what do you think about sales trainers?
I think it's very hard to find a very good sales trainer. No, I'm going to leave it at that. No, I'm kidding. I think it is such a specific and unique role. And in order to find someone that maybe ticks off all the boxes, like, you mentioned methodologies, right? Even their approach to sales, even the content, the delivery, the personality, the persona, like to find that perfect package is so hard. But if it exists out there, please let me know.
Yeah.
But then the question also is, if that person is solely responsible for training, then having that training program mapped out. So it's not just, hey, great, we have onboarding and you're the sales trainer for onboarding, but then what do you do for the remainder of the year?
Yeah.
Right. So you need to almost have it mapped out. So, if we're bringing on however many people throughout the year, that sales trainer is not just, sitting around thinking, well, should I deliver this? Should I not deliver this? I think you need really a lot of structure around that role to make it work.
Yeah.
And I think a sales trainer for me shouldn't just be a facilitator in the sense of I will come and I will deliver the content, but I would also want the sales trainer to be building out content in the
Yeah.
background.
So
You
almost like a
hybrid role.
hybrid like instructional designer role, which
Yeah.
is another type of role that you'll start to see in these
Yeah.
larger enablement teams, is
Yeah.
someone who can actually build out the program, build out, e-learning content
In a fun way.
in a fun way, and not have enablement managers do that. I always think like enablement managers should be doing that. But I come from an instructional design background. So I come from, I used to build e-learnings and all of that kind of stuff. So I've always just done that. Like, so I have to remind myself that I'm actually hiring people on my team who come from doing the job that they're now supporting, and they do not have the skills
I know. I don't.
to build an e-learning, in an amazing e-learning experience. And if that's a part of your learning strategy for your sales team, it's probably worth investing in that type of role. But I think it'll be really difficult to find someone who is an instructional designer, but also a sales facilitator. Like that is like a unicorn if I've ever heard one. So it might make sense to have like a contractor that you use from an instructional design standpoint, and a contractor that you use for facilitation, and kind of agree upon like you'll probably facilitate 20 hours worth of trainings a month, sort of thing, and maybe start there, and then kind of build your case for like a full-time hire.
And it's interesting because if I look back at the instructional designer that I used to work with in the past, this person was great, but she was very much an introvert.
Yeah.
It's like all she needed was the brief. How do you want to make it, look? How long should it last? Do you have a knowledge check involved? You give her the content. She will literally lock herself away in a room, build out the e-learning lesson, come back, give you the opportunity to review it, go through it. She can make changes, but she would not be the right person to put in front of a classroom and actually deliver the content.
Correct.
If we're talking about mixing instructional designs with being a sales trainer, that just wasn't her.
No.
And I think if I was to ask her, like, great, you've built this out, but actually the first time we would like to run it live, so off you go, I think she would have had a heart attack, because, that wasn't the role she was hired for. And also it wasn't her strength. She was very good when it comes to sitting down, designing things, very much yourself, your own time, you're doing the task, you're doing the job. But yeah, training, facilitating, delivery, that was just not her forte. And also her knowledge wasn't there, right? Whatever she was building out in the platform she was using was based purely on the information and the content that we've given to her.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There was a little bit of a creative element in terms of how are we going to make it look, and how do we make the questions appear? And if you click on a person, do they say something? And that was all there, but it was all based on the content that we've given her.
Yeah. And that's what really good instructional designers do.
Right.
Yeah. Like I remember I'd spend like 8 hours a day in Adobe Captivate, literally headphones on, like building stuff and like formatting everything, having a button appear that the button, you click this and it goes, somewhere else. That is like, I couldn't do that all the time. like I'm like an introverted extrovert kind of thing, right? Like I can't just sit on my computer and do that all the time. But there are people who love that type of work all the time. Those are not the people that you should have be a facilitator on your team.
Absolutely. Any other roles that we missed? So we have sales trainer, instructional designer, obviously for bigger companies out there that already have a very solid enablement team in place, sales enablement managers, executives, program managers dedicated specifically to onboarding.
How about there's a role that I've been thinking about, and it's almost like tools enablement.
Yeah.
So I manage both RevOps and enablement. And so RevOps kind of owns like our tools and making sure that they function properly. They're all connected through Salesforce. They give licenses to new hires, take them away when people leave. but we don't have someone who's dedicated to making sure the tools that we spend money on are actually being used and actually like making a positive impact on our sales team.
Yeah.
So that's one that I think could potentially be worth exploring.
Yeah. And I think we've all been in situations where we have a lot of tools, technology, and then we realize it's not used, it's not being leveraged. People don't know how to use it effectively. And it almost brings me to the point that in any kind of enablement function and role, you should be doing an audit as well.
Yes.
Right. And whether that's enablement or sometimes it's rev ops, like sales ops, right? A lot of tools and tooling will go under operations.
Yep.
But I think doing that audit in the beginning is crucial to understand, are we actually making use of tools that we've paid for? Yeah. And are they giving us what we need? And I think any good enablement manager, if you're working closely with account managers, if you're working closely with AEs and SDRs, I think that's also a little bit part of the role. So I'm not sure if I would hire a dedicated person for that.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't know what else they would be doing throughout the year.
Yeah. And it's a tough pill to swallow. It's like we pay all this money for tools, but we have to pay someone to make sure that we use all these tools. So why are we buying these tools to begin with if they're not like inherently just going to be used? So it's like that's definitely a question I keep pondering. I am not close to hiring a person dedicated to this, but it is something that I have thought about for sure.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right. I think that's a wrap.
I think it's a wrap for today. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this is episode 6. We'll see you guys next week for episode 7. Hopefully you're walking away from this episode with a little bit of ideas and thoughts around how to structure your enablement team, what that should look like, what are the different roles that you should consider. But we'll see you guys next week for episode 7.
Amazing. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you soon.